I woke up to voices. Not gentle, not loving, sharp, detached, almost bored. "We're not even her real kids," my stepson said. "Why should we be stuck taking care of her?" Then my stepdaughter's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. "I just hope she doesn't make it. The estate's almost ready anyway." Their words cut through the fog of morphine like a blade. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My arms felt heavy, filled with sand, and wires snaked across my chest like vines choking a tree. The machines behind me beeped slowly. That was the sound of my life still hanging on. And I wasn't sure if I wanted it back. I sensed them at the foot of the hospital bed, close enough to touch me but galaxies away from seeing me as their mother. They didn't know I was awake, or maybe they didn't care. "She didn't even adopt us," he added. "She just married Dad. That doesn't mean we owe her anything." A nurse cleared her throat. "Maybe you should step outside." "Whatever," my stepdaughter muttered, her heels tapping away down the hall like punctuation marks in the sentence of my erasure. I stared at the ceiling tiles and pretended I was still unconscious. Pretended I hadn't just heard the two people I had raised, since they were still wiping applesauce off their chins, talk about me like a burden, like a dead weight they couldn't wait to bury. I had always feared getting old. I never thought the real fear was getting forgotten while still alive. And in that moment, something in me shifted. Not broken, just snapped back into place. They thought I was dying? Good. Let them believe that. Because the woman they thought they could discard? She wasn't the one waking up. I met Richard Pierce when I was 39. At that point, I had already accepted that I might never become a mother. I had built a quiet, stable life teaching literature at a community college, tending to a garden behind my small rental, and spending holidays with a handful of close friends. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Then Richard came along, charming in a reserved, dependable kind of way. He had 2 young children from his first marriage, Tyler, a quiet 4-year-old boy who flinched at loud sounds, and Emily, just shy of 3, who clung to her father like he was the last solid thing in the world. Their mother had left suddenly, trading the Midwest for a new life overseas. No letters, no calls, just absence. Richard didn't talk about it much, only said she wasn't ready to be a parent. I didn't come into their lives expecting to become anything more than a kind presence. But children don't care about legalities. They care about bedtime songs and warm lunches. They care about someone showing up, and I did. That first winter, Emily called me Mama Joe in a whisper when she had a nightmare. Tyler would sit beside me on the couch, one arm hooked around my elbow like it anchored him. It wasn't a formal title. There were no adoption papers, no courtroom declarations. Just tiny hands reaching for mine and hearts learning to trust again. Richard and I married the following year. He never pushed for me to adopt them. "It's just paperwork," he'd said with a smile. "They know who loves them." Maybe that was when the lie began, believing that love was enough. Over the next 2 decades, I packed their school lunches, helped them study for spelling tests, stayed up when they were sick. I was there for every milestone, every scraped knee, every parent-teacher conference where the teacher would glance at me, then politely say, "Stepmother." And I'd smile like it didn't sting. Because I thought love would be louder than legal terms. I thought it would count when it mattered most. I was wrong. After Richard died pancreatic cancer, swift and merciless, everything changed. Tyler and Emily were in college by then, drifting through life on their own terms. They showed up for the funeral dressed in black, holding my hands like they meant it. That was the last time I felt like I belonged to them. What followed wasn't a rupture. It was a quiet erosion. Phone calls turned into short texts, texts faded into silence. On holidays, they'd appear with smiles and small talk, but they never stayed long. The warmth was gone. The connection, severed somewhere I couldn't reach. I told myself they were busy, building their lives. Maybe that was true for a while. But eventually, I saw it for what it was. I was no longer Mom. I was Joanna. I was the woman who had the deed, the one who kept the house clean, and the fridge full, and the taxes paid. They loved the things I gave them, the comfort, the stability, the traditions, but they no longer loved me. I remember the Thanksgiving just a year before the crash. I woke up at 5 a.m. to make Tyler's favorite pecan pie from scratch. Emily didn't show. Tyler came late and left early, complaining about traffic. Still, I cooked. Still, I hoped. I thought if I just kept loving them, they would find their way back. But love isn't a leash, and I was done dragging it behind me. What I gave them wasn't conditional, but their affection had always been. They were Richard's children by blood. They were mine only when it was convenient. I used to think love was the bond that tied us. Now I understood it was convenience. And the moment I stopped being convenient, I stopped being theirs. The crash happened on a quiet Tuesday morning. No rain, no ice, no warning. Just a sharp curve at the end of Hollow Creek Road, the kind I'd driven 100 times before. I pressed the brake, nothing. Just the eerie clang of resistance, like something inside the car had come undone. The world tilted, then metal, then glass, then nothing. They called it an accident, a fluke, maybe a worn brake pad, maybe an old system finally giving up. But I knew my car. I kept it clean, serviced, and cared for the way some people care for heirlooms. It wasn't neglect, it was something else, something intentional. And the memories came creeping back. Just a week earlier, Emily had borrowed the car, said hers was low on gas, and she was late to a meeting. She brought it back with the seat pushed so far forward I could barely climb in. The mirrors were off and the glove box was half open, I noticed, but I brushed it off. Then there was Tyler. The week before that, he'd taken my keys with a practiced smile. "I'll check your tire pressure," he said. "Looks a little low." He didn't ask, he just went. And when they visited after the accident, still thinking I was unconscious, they didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't even mention the crash. Only one question: what happens if she can't live alone anymore? Not if, when. That's when I knew. They weren't scared I might die. They were scared I might live. And that changed everything. I had spent 2 weeks lying still, pretending to be weaker than I was, but my mind was sharp. My memories clearer than ever. And piece by piece, a new picture formed. Not of a freak accident, but of something planned, orchestrated. A clean exit for them. And now a reckoning for me. 2 months before the crash, I had a feeling. It wasn't fear, not yet, just a tug, a whisper in the back of my mind that something wasn't right. It came the day I passed by the living room with a basket of towels and heard laughter, the kind that's too loud, too casual to be innocent. Tyler was chuckling. "Just give it a couple more years, she'll croak and we'll split the house." Emily snorted. "Bet she leaves it to a cat or some library just to be spiteful." They laughed like it was a joke. But I wasn't laughing. That night I called Russell Kim, a state lawyer, mid-40s, polished, polite, the kind of man who knew how to keep his voice steady, even when the air got cold. We sat across from each other in his quiet office while I slid over my old will, the deed, the insurance policy, everything they thought they'd inherit. Then I handed him a photo of April. She was 6 the year her mother died, my goddaughter. I took her in for 6 months while her father tried to get clean. Sticky hands, wide eyes, always calling me Mama Joe. She's 32 now, works at a women's shelter, sends handwritten letters that smell like citrus and love. Still signs them, "Your girl, April." I want her to have everything I told Russell. He looked up, surprised. Everything. Everything. The house, the savings, the pearl earrings I only wore twice but kept like a promise, the life I built. Because blood never showed up at my door with soup when I had the flu, but April did. Russell didn't ask for details, just nodded and got to work. The new documents were signed and sealed within a week. The original shredded, my instructions airtight. If April couldn't be reached within 30 days of my death, the estate would go to the shelter she worked at. Not a dime to either child. And if they contested, let them try, Russell said with a small smile. They'll waste more than they'll win. I left his office lighter than I'd felt in years. Because for the first time, I wasn't hoping they'd love me again. I was protecting the woman who had loved them all along. Back in the hospital, I said nothing. Silence became my armor. But Clara, the nurse with soft hands and sharper eyes, knew better. She could read people the way some read books. One afternoon, as she checked my vitals, she looked at me for a long moment and said, "You're aware, aren't you?" I didn't blink, just the faintest nod. That was all she needed. The next morning, a man in navy windbreaker appeared at the window. No badge, no clipboard, just calm eyes and quiet shoes. Clara called him my visitor. "I'm Elliot," he said. "You hired me years ago during your divorce, remember?" Another blink. Yes. I'm good at reading silence, he added. Then he pulled out a photo. My car wrecked, Dusty zoomed in to show the brake line. This was cut, clean. Someone tried to make it look like wear and tear. It wasn't. I didn't feel fear. I felt something colder, sharper, relief. Now it wasn't a suspicion. It was proof. Elliot leaned closer. We've already pulled footage from your street cam and the hospital lobby. Your son logged into the visitor Wi-Fi and opened a document called Advanced Directive Template while you were unconscious. He placed a printout on the tray beside me. Then another photo, my daughter's car in the driveway, time-stamped the night before the crash, despite her telling me she'd been out of town. Clara stood by the door, arms crossed. They think you're helpless, she said. They don't know you've already started fighting back. That evening, she helped me tap out her code on her palm. 3 taps, yes. 1 long drag, get Elliot. And so the plan formed. Not loud, not angry. Precise. Face eyes. Like a scalpel instead of a hammer. Elliot filed the new will. Russell made it official. Clara documented the whispers, the behavior, the small signs of calculated cruelty. Then came the final step. I need 1 signature, Elliot said. Just 1. For legal protection, elder endangerment, attempted harm. This makes it a felony. That night, under dim hallway lights, Clara brought in the clipboard. My hand shook, but I signed. And with that, I stopped being a victim and became the architect of their reckoning. They thought I was dying. But I left the hospital the night before they arrived, rolled out quietly in a wheelchair, wrapped in a navy quilt Grace had sewn years ago, when the kids were still little and afraid of thunderstorms. Grace had been my neighbor for decades, never nosy, just observant. She was the one who noticed Tyler hovering near the mailbox too often, the one who saw Emily sitting in her car out front for 20 minutes without coming to the door. She didn't say much at first, just started writing things down, just in case. She became my silent witness. So when my discharge came, she opened the attic room in her house 3 houses down, with a perfect view of mine. And there, propped up by pillows, sipping tea from a travel mug, I watched them walk into the hospital lobby dressed in black like they were starring in their own performance of grief. He wore a wrinkled suit. She had on a blouse that looked expensive, but careless. 4 days late, they walked in like they owned the place. Room 219, Emily said softly to the nurse. We're here to collect her things and speak to someone about next steps. The nurse typed something in, then frowned. She was discharged last night, she said. All arrangements were made. Her lawyer handled everything. Tyler blinked. By who? She didn't answer, just handed over a flat manila envelope. No return address, no warmth. Inside was my letter. You always assumed I wouldn't outlast your patience. You were wrong. You always assumed silence meant permission. It didn't. I know everything, and I left you nothing. No signature, no affection, just one final truth. I may have raised you, but I no longer claim you not. Witnesses said Emily dropped the letter. Tyler bent to pick it up, but not before others saw the words. And in the attic window above, I watched. Not as a ghost, but as the woman who left before they even thought to say goodbye. Because I wasn't theirs anymore. And they were about to find out what that really meant. They pulled up to the house like they still owned it. Emily's Lexus sat crooked in the driveway. Tyler's truck idled behind, engine rumbling like it was impatient for the keys. He jumped out first, heading straight for the front door, tugging on the knob like it owed him something. It didn't budge. A new lockbox. A fresh brass plaque mounted beside the bell. This property is under legal review. For all inquiries, contact Kim Associates. Emily circled to the back, calling out like it was a fire drill. It's locked. Everything's locked. Of course it was. Us. A moment later, Russell's property manager pulled into the driveway, wearing a press suit and carrying a clipboard. I'm here on behalf of M's Joanna Pierce, he said. They froze. She's alive? Emily asked, like it ruined her weekend. Very much, he replied. And quite lucid. Would you like me to read her statement? He didn't wait for permission. Effective immediately, this property is no longer within your legal access or interest. Do not attempt entry. Any trespassing will be reported. A copy of the new deed has been mailed to your last known address. You were not listed as heirs. Do not return. He handed them each a sealed envelope. Emily didn't touch hers. Tyler took his like it was a ticket he didn't believe he deserved. They stood in the driveway, two adults in black clothes with nowhere to go. Then they sat, arguing at first, quiet later. Emily read her letter 3 times. Her mouth moved with the words. Then she threw it. Not gently, like it burned her fingers. I knew what part broke her. You never once called me Mom when no one was listening. Tyler paced in front of the rose garden I had planted with Richard 20 years ago. Emily just sat on the porch steps, lit a cigarette she wasn't supposed to have. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at the locked door. And for the first time, I saw it on her face, loss. Not just of the house, but of the story she told herself all these years. That no matter how far she strayed, she could always come back. And I would still be there. Still Mom. Still hers. Not anymore. 3 hours away from the life I left behind, tucked against the edge of a pine-covered hillside, there's a place called Second Bloom. No gates, no cameras, just a wooden sign carved by hand. You are not what they did. I stood there for a long while, suitcase in one hand, legal documents in the other. The air smelled like rosemary and new soil, quiet, clean, undemanding. Inside, I met Rosa, 63. Used to be a school principal before her son forged her name on 5 refinance loans. Margaret, 74, left her house with nothing but a purse and a folder of receipts after her husband of 40 years emptied their joint savings. We don't tell our stories right away. We sit, we plant, we write things we might never send. We make tea and speak our names like we're learning them again. No one asks who you were. They ask who you're becoming. For me, the healing didn't begin in the courtroom. It began here in the garden, pulling weeds beside a woman who never learned to say no until it nearly killed her. In the kitchen, cooking soup beside another who hadn't been called by her first name in over a decade. In the stillness between the wind and the breath it carries. I wasn't rebuilding the old version of myself. I was planting something new. And I understood now what they tried to take from me wasn't money or property or even love. It was identity. But identity, when rooted in truth, doesn't die, it survives. It blooms. Second Bloom isn't a shelter. It's a reckoning, a quiet revolt. Built for women who've been erased and now choose to be seen. And here, among strangers who felt like home, I started to remember what it felt like to belong. Not to others, but to myself. They thought I wouldn't fight back. They thought silence meant surrender. But silence, when chosen, is power. I am Joanna Pierce. Not a footnote in someone else's story. Not a cautionary tale. Not a forgotten name on a deed. I am the woman who loved deeply, lost fiercely, and chose herself anyway. I didn't burn bridges. I built gates. And if you're listening, if you've ever been used, erased, or overlooked by the very people you gave everything to, know this. You're not alone. Your voice matters. And if this story spoke to you, like, share, leave a comment. Someone out there needs to hear it.